Well, hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to tune into this webinar today, which is hosted by HR Grapevine and presented by Winning Temp. My name's Liam Suter. I'm the online editor for HR Grapevine, which puts me in charge of daily news content. But today I'm going to be something more akin to a housekeeper for this webinar, which, as you already know, is called Fearless Feedback, helping your managers unlock the power of psychological safety. Before I hand over to today's speakers, I'll just run through a few quick details of what's going to happen today for you watching. As with all of our webinars, we really want to get you, the audience, as involved as possible. We have a Q&A function right by the side of your screen there. So you can ask our presenters questions at any point during today's session, as and when they come to mind. So do get those questions in and we'll get around to answering as many of those as we can at the end of the webinar. We'll also be showing you a preview, a demo video of the Winning Temp platform at the end of the session, so do stick around for that as well. This webinar will also be available to watch on demand right here on HR Grapevine shortly after the live stream ends. So if there's any key moments that you want to go over again, you absolutely can do so. But now onto the webinar itself. I'm joined today by Phil Cohen, who's the Customer Success Manager at Winning Temp, and Jonathan Gallie, who is the People and Talent Director at Babington. They're the folks who you're actually here to listen to today. So in a moment, I'll hand over to the pair to introduce themselves and their organisations in a little bit more detail. But before I do, I'll just let you know that we will also be running some polls throughout today's session, and we'd be really grateful if you could participate in those too. Starting with one which is live right now, we want to know, on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you with the principles of psychological safety? So while you're all busy getting your answers in there, I will hand over to Phil to introduce himself and get us started with today's session. So Phil, over to you.
Thank you very much, Liam, and thanks to you and Lauren and all the team at HR Grapevine for all your help making today possible. It's great to be collaborating with you guys again. And indeed, thanks to the marketing teams, the respective marketing teams from Babington, Abby at Babington and Derek and the team here at Winning Temp for all the hard work you've put in to making today a success. And indeed, thanks to you for your time, taking time out of your day for joining us today. Thank you very much. I think if it's okay, I'll let Jonathan start by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that Babington does.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So again, thank you to HR Grapevine for hosting us. So I'm the HR Director at Babington. Babington essentially helps organisations and individuals unlock their potential to perform at their best. So we are a training provider with over 40 years experience. We're an Ofsted Grade 2 apprenticeship provider. We have over 90 different learning programs that we deliver across the UK to a variety of different organisations, SMEs right through to large PLCs. And our training programs sit in the apprenticeship space, professional qualifications, commercially funded, right through to boot camps. So variety of training on offer through Babington, and by all means check out our website afterwards or contact myself for more information.
Thank you very much. And I'm Phil Cohen. As Liam said, I'm the Customer Success Manager here at Winning Temp. Been with the business just over a year and a half now. Prior to that, I was working in recruitment technology, ATS assessments, and all of that sort of thing. So yes, if some of that sort of starts to creep into some of our conversations today, then you'll know why. But before we get into today's topic, I just want to share with you a bit about what it is that we do here at Winning Temp. Our business idea and vision is to forever change how people succeed together. When employees find their job meaningful, when they receive feedback on how they're doing, when they have the possibility to contribute and continue to develop and learn, they will also perform better and help the company reach its desired results. Winning Temp is not only the name of our company, it is also the name of our product. Winning Temp stands for Winning Temperature and is an employee engagement platform, a software solution, where our customers can collect feedback from their employees on a weekly basis regarding how they perceive leadership, involvement, stress, teamwork, etc. Winning Temp uses AI to send out relevant questions linked to each employee's work situation. So if, for example, you have one employee experiencing a stressful period at work when answering questions regarding the work situation 1 week, the system will continue to ask follow-up questions related to stress over a period of time to see if it was just a one-time situation where the stress levels were high, or if we have a negative trend and need to prioritize activities to improve the situation. If you're curious to learn more, as Liam said, we'll be showing a very brief 2-minute video at the end of this webinar that tells you a little bit more about Winning Temp. Okay, so let's get into it. Jonathan, if I can start by asking, well, let's look at the poll first. What are people saying to us, Liam, about psychological safety?
Well, firstly, thank you very much, everyone who's participated. We've had quite a lot of responses in so far. So far, the majority of people are saying the scale is tipping around about 3 to 4. So just under 40% of people so far have answered that they are around about the 3 mark on in confidence. And then an equal amount of people actually say 4, which I'd imagine is obviously very confident. And then around another quarter actually say they're not so confident. They've clicked 2. On the scale of 1 to 5 there. Only a couple of people say that have clicked 5, so only a couple of people say that they're extremely confident on that, and 3 to 4 people are saying that they're not very confident at all, so they clicked 1.
Okay. So it sounds like we've got a bit of a bell curve there.
Yeah, and the majority of people fortunately seem fairly confident, it seems, from those results.
Interesting. Okay. So Jonathan, let's start by asking what it is. How do you understand psychological safety? How would you define psychological safety?
So, I mean, in terms of this space, it's quite interesting, and I suppose there's 2 parts to my answer in regards to that. So, those who are saying that they are, 4 out of 5 will no doubt know it's been around a long time. So, from the 1950s onwards, it's been a big topic of discussion. And ultimately, the definition back then was you can speak up without being punished or embarrassed for ideas, questions, and concerns that you might raise in a team working environment. So from a very basic principle, that's what it is. As you read more about psychological safety, it's not about the individual. So it's very much focused on team. It's not about being nice. It's not about individual personality. It's very much focused on group. And it blends trust and respect. So when you then start to look at more recent definitions of psychological safety, it talks about a shared belief in a team operating in an environment that's safe for interpersonal risk taking. So what I find interesting about this is it opens up the second question, which is what do we mean by interpersonal risk? And there were 2 contradictory parts of all of our instincts and DNA, which I found quite interesting. One is that we all have a conservative tendency. So as individuals, we want to preserve ourselves. We don't want to look daft. We don't want to be the one that asks the daft question. We don't want to make mistakes as individuals. I don't think any of us particularly like being exposed and making mistakes. The other instinct that the majority of humans have is an expansive tendency. We like to explore. We like ideas, we like excitement, and actually we do like risk-taking, and they are at odds with one another. So the big question and the big challenge within psychological safety is how do we manage interpersonal risk? So interpersonal risk is essentially the conservative tendency. I'm not going to ask a question, Phil, for fear of you thinking I'm a bit daft. So from a psychological safety perspective, it's an environment where you have a safe space for interpersonal risk taking, i.e. I will ask questions, I will present you with ideas that may not work, and I will debate them with you.
Okay, that's interesting. And I guess that kind of operates at an individual level, at a team level, but also for managers as well. That's interesting. Why I'm seeing a lot more talk about psychological safety in terms of health and safety as well from the clients I speak to. So we know there's the new ISO standard, ISO 45003, that's coming into place about mental well-being and psychological safety and that sort of thing. And obviously creating an environment of psychological safety is being seen as being very important. But what can you say about why is it important? to a business? If you're going to do a sort of pitch for training, why would you say it's important to a business to have a culture of psychological safety, and what are the benefits they can expect from that?
Yeah, I suppose within that answer, there's a personal aspect to that. What do I think? And also the research aspect. So I'd begin with the research aspect. And there's a really interesting piece of research that was done by Google. So they assessed 180 teams, or over 180 teams, to understand, well, which ones were high performing and why. And two things came out of that. So the top performing teams had a huge aspect of trust within them, and a significant aspect of what we're terming psychological safety, the ability to act as a team and not feel that there'll be retribution, and they can take risks in a safe space. So from that research, and I would encourage everybody on the call, if they haven't already, to read up on the Google research, is essentially psychological safety takes the brakes off. So there'll be lots of people, practitioners on this call, no doubt, who have the challenge of bringing in talent to their organization and raising performance. And for me, what the research showed is you can have excellent talent within your team, but if they don't feel like they can raise questions and they can shape ideas and solutions, you're not going to get the best from them. So why it's important is that research essentially said psychological safety takes the brakes off the talent in the organization to actually explore and share ideas. The second part of the research I found very interesting in terms of the comparison between the teams that were high performing with psychological safety and those without. And it summed it up quite nicely for me to say, well, the ones without had an environment of censorship within them. So there was a lack of knowledge sharing. People weren't asking questions. People weren't sharing ideas, and there was a huge impact as a consequence on output, versus those that were collaborating, sharing ideas, and ultimately learning from one another.
Okay, it's interesting. I'm sure if anybody wants the link, they're welcome to get in touch with us, and we can you can share that with them for the research. I think speaking from myself, from my point of view, when I'm in a team, working in a team when there's a high degree of psychological safety, sort of looking at it from the bottom up, if you like, you do get a sense of you're being valued, you're being respected. Inclusivity is a word that often comes up in the conversations that I have with clients, and respect as well, I think you mentioned. But it also, because there's no dissonance, there's no disconnect between what you're thinking and what you're saying, you feel a lot more engaged, and you feel, well, there's no sort of duplicitousness, if that is a word. There's no, when you have got that disconnect, there's the sort of mental health issues as well, which come along with that. But also it sort of opens up. You become more sort of emotional intelligence comes into it, I guess, but also conflict management as well, I would say, because you're not always going to agree with everybody in the team. You need to sort of get along. You need to sort of, come up with an idea that's going to move forwards, even if it's not the idea that you thought, or even if it's not the idea that you quite particularly agree with. So there's that aspect to it as well. So it does bring out skills, not just for the managers, but I think also there's a bottom up approach to benefit as well.
And you mentioned a couple of key measures there that, again, the HR practitioners on this call will be used to, in terms of employee engagement, the surveys and the things that you can get from Winning Temp itself, reduce staff turnover. There are core measures that indicate whether people are in an environment that's open and psychologically safe versus those that aren't. And I think that the other key aspect from a leadership perspective is what you can visually see as well. So you can visually see participation, when you're in a meeting, when you're watching a project progress, you can see whether the purpose is clear or not. Is there inclusivity? Has everyone had a voice in the idea? Or is it, I'm doing something for my boss, I'm doing something because I've been told to? So there's definitely an aspect of the measures of engagement from a people perspective, but also what are you seeing and feeling within a team, within a project, or within the organization itself?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely sometimes it's difficult to put it into words or to calculate it, to actually measure it, but you can actually sense when there's, we say, cut the atmosphere with a knife. You can actually sense when things are buzzing and when they're not. So, well, to talk about that then, let's without sort of getting too murky, what would you say? What happens when there is a lack of psychological safety? What can go wrong in the team when that falls apart?
I think it's the opposite of the participative teamwork that we've just discussed. So certainly I was thinking about what does it look like, and I think I was thinking back to school days, and I don't know if everyone can remember that far back, but you imagine being in the classroom and the teacher says, has anyone got any questions? And no one says anything.
Right.
And then finally someone asks the question that everyone wanted to ask. And that is an example of, a lack of open, honest, fearless environment. So a lack of psychological safety is there's no transparency and there's no ownership. Mm-hmm. From a work perspective, I was considering what I've seen as a HR director over the years, and ultimately it's a lack of collective idea. So I'm doing this because I've been told to, or I'm doing this because this is the idea of the leadership team. Therefore, when it goes wrong, there's no accountability on me because I'll say, well, it's Phil's idea. So transparency and ownership is a key one. And then I think, significant friction, lack of teamwork, you'll see that. And ultimately, blame and protectionism, which I think is probably the most damaging behavior that no doubt some of us can reflect on, where it's not worked. But if I'm not in an environment where I can admit it, I may hide the mistake, or I'll look for someone else to blame. And that's probably the most toxic potential aspect of a lack of psychological safety.
And I think it's interesting you mentioned it, but there's a kind of difference between groupthink, if you like, where everyone just goes along with it just because the manager says so or whatever it is, versus consensus, where you might not agree with it, but you've kind of bounced it around the team and you've sort of shaped it to the best way you possibly can, and you sort of get behind it because that's what we've come to as a team. Although as individuals you might not have put in, it might not be 100% of what you want. You can still sort of get behind an idea, even though it's not 100% of what it is that you put forward. How does a culture of psychological safety tie in with data-driven management, would you say?
I think it certainly can start with data. So from the perspective, again, of people on this call who are 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5 in terms of their understanding in this area, no doubt they are a bit further down the track. Those who've got less experience in this area or haven't really thought about it, I would suggest the first place would be, well, what does the data tell you from a people perspective and an organizational perspective? So from a data perspective, what's your staff turnover like? What's employee engagement like? And what are the individuals within the organization saying and collective teams saying? So again, you know how I've utilized Winning Temp in the past is looking specifically at teams. What are they saying is great within the team and less so? And actually, is the indicative feedback that they're giving showing that they have a collective voice or not? And as I said before, psychological safety is about being able to voice concerns. And if they're saying something on a survey like Winning Temp, but aren't saying that in person, you know that you've got some distance to travel to get to the environment that you really need.
Absolutely. And I think if you're going to talk about data-driven management, if you're going to gather data, you don't want those things that you were talking about earlier. You don't want the friction. You don't want the disconnect. You want to be able to make sure that you've got all of the data at hand, the feedback at hand, to be able to make the decisions you want to make. So to do that, you need de facto, you need a culture of psychological safety, or otherwise there are going to be taboos. There are going to be the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, because and that means that you haven't got what you need to be able to make the decisions that you need to make, and you haven't got that sort of feedback loop, if you like. Yeah, I think also that there's when in some of the conversations I've had with yourself and with other clients, is we link it all in with employee engagement, because we want that feedback loop spinning. We want that feedback loop going around and constantly improving, because on the one hand, you're gathering data, and as an employee, as I said earlier, you kind of feel that engagement by giving the feedback. So you feel that connection with your manager, with the team, with the company, as a result of your contribution. that sense of worth, that sense of belonging, that sense of inclusivity, respect. But also for the manager's point of view as well, like you were kind of saying earlier, is for them to be engaged with their team, to be able to understand what's going on and what the temperature's like, and how the engagement is faring and how it's fluctuating, because it will fluctuate over time, and be able to spot peaks and troughs as and when they come about.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about managers, but before we do, Liam, we have a poll question to put up, please.
Yes, absolutely. So one that we just a few seconds ago. Do you have management tools in place to support psychological safety? So obviously one of the big issues we're talking about there. We want to know simple yes or no. So that's quite a few responses coming in already. 80% of people so far actually say no, that they don't have those tools in place. So just a fifth of people so far say that yes, they have management tools in place to support psychological safety. Obviously, that's ever changing at the moment, but it is roughly, it's ebbing between 3/4 to 80% is people saying that no, they don't have those tools.
More no's than yeses, basically. That's interesting. That's interesting. When you're, I mean, obviously leaders have a strong role to play in creating a culture of psychological safety. What skills do you feel, Jonathan, that they need? For those people that have answered that they haven't got the tools in place? What skills do they need to develop in their managers to be able to nurture, to foster a culture of psychological safety? Would you say?
Well, certainly that response rate's interesting in terms of what tools and what environment the leaders need. I think it certainly starts with a foundation of leadership competence. And I think we all know in the organisations we've no doubt been in over the years, lots of managers and leaders go into those roles because they've had a great technical skill set and they've progressed into a leadership position. Have they truly been trained and developed in management and leadership? So I'd certainly say the first question is, have we, as HR practitioners and leaders in businesses, equipped them with the skill sets? When I was thinking of it with a more broader hat on in terms of my own experience over the years, the first one for me is, seek to understand before you wish to be understood. So one of Stephen Covey's 7 habits, I think, is really powerful in terms of asking questions as a leader. Does the leader have empathy? Are they open and really understand what's going on in the team before they pass judgment? And now there's a lot of vulnerability that comes with that when a leader is asking questions and showing their own vulnerabilities. But I would say seek to understand before you wish to be understood and lead that team. I think objectivity is really crucial within all of this. So play the ball, not the man, in terms of, well, what's truly going on? Where has a project really performed or not performed? What are the key challenges within the department or even the whole business in totality? And has the leader got the skill to use objective data? As an individual employee, it's far easier to understand where mistakes have been made and be open about them and come up with innovative solutions if you've got an objective platform of this is the data and this is what it's telling us, rather than subjectivity, preferential treatment, favoritism, and all of the things that will take you back to the more toxic, closed environment we discussed earlier. So seek to understand, objectivity. I think the third one is lots of organizations do have strong value frameworks, and certainly the organizations I've worked in where we've been able to really take big steps forward with psychological safety is that they use them within their behavioral framework. So we seek to do the right thing in the right way. So how is that applied in the workplace? How does that facilitate open feedback? Everyone's on the same pitch playing the same game, as it were. So how do you utilize your value framework if you have one? And if you don't have one, how could you develop one that would really open up the environment? And then the fourth is empowerment, encouragement, and idea sharing. And that has to be facilitated from the leader. And you and I have worked on a few projects together. And one of the things I've found is Winning Temp is a great tool to give me the raw data and tell me what the trends are. I've then introduced what I would term quite structured frameworks to facilitate open conversation. My favorite being stop, start, continue, both on an individual level and a team level. So as a leader, Phil, what would you like me to stop doing, start doing, and continue doing, which will allow you to perform and empower you? As a team, what do we want to stop doing, start doing, and continue doing? What are we doing as a collective team that's really irritating us all? And that opens up the discussion. However, I have to be quite vulnerable doing that, because you may tell me something I don't want to hear. I have to be quite objective rather than ignore you, take that feedback on board and do something with it. And ultimately, I have to be quite open, because there's no point me asking you to tell me what I should start doing and stop doing if I'm going to be defensive. So lots of skills that I think are crucial, starting with, have you trained your leadership team in the right manner? But they would be my top 4.
I really like when you talk about vulnerability, because I'm guessing for a leader that doesn't come naturally, does it? You've been promoted into this role. You're there to give all the answers. You're there to be the person everyone in the team looks up to for everything. And yet, you know, all good leaders have their failings, and the way you get around that is by surrounding yourself in a team that can help you and support you in that, and you can bounce ideas off. So it's interesting that you're recognizing that, and you're absolutely right. Having the value framework that helps sort of guide your decision making in terms of understanding the feedback. And you know, sometimes the feedback's going to be just you know, not something we can do anything about. That's also important, and it's good that managers set the expectations around that, so that people know, you know, there are limitations on what you can physically do as a manager.
Yeah.
Where do you see, sort of following on from that, then where do you see leaders getting stuck when it comes to psychological safety?
Well, I think the vulnerability and the humility is a difficult one. Certainly, there'll be a fear of failure. You know, if you're a manager and a leader and you're showing that vulnerability, what's that projecting on people? And you know, psychological safety within the leadership community is just as important as the wider teams. So, are they themselves in an environment where they can ask questions? And we were talking last week, and I said I'm seeing less and less leaders asking questions, because it shows a vulnerability that maybe they're not comfortable with. So I think that's a key one. I think being open-minded and trusting the team, and you know, if a leader is in a position where they've got a team that's long-standing and they aren't currently facilitating this environment, you can't change it overnight. It would be very bizarre if next week you go from not asking any questions to being really open, and people will wonder what's going on. So I think the step change is a challenge. And I think with the vulnerability, there's also an aspect of, well, I have to act on the feedback. So not only do I need to take on your stop, start, continue feedback, or whatever it is that you do as a practical tool to get there, but I have to act on it. And I think that's a key challenge for leaders, particularly if it's something that they don't feel they can or should change. And I've been in the environment where someone's told me, given me feedback, and I think, well, there's a reason why I do that. And I'm not in a position where I can change it. The next step is to explain to them why that's the case. So again, being really open and honest. And I think finally, it's a case of, well, how does your organization view leadership, and how do individual leaders view leadership? If you're in an environment where leaders have to have all of the answers, and therefore I as a HR leader feel like I have to have all the answers and I have to have full control, it's going to be exceptionally difficult. So again, it might be that you're in a position where there needs to be a step change at senior management level to facilitate true openness first. And certainly I'm of the view that leaders don't have to have all the answers, and they should have expertise and high performers in their team that can absolutely be innovative. And the job of a leader is to facilitate a high performing team, not to dictate and be the expert themselves.
it's interesting when you talk about trust that yes, it's a two-way thing, isn't it? Like, just as the team needs to trust the manager or the leader needs themselves to be able to trust the team as well. It works both ways, and I see that. And also, you've spoken about fear of failure as well. What is the company culture? What is the senior leadership culture and attitude towards failure? So, and that sort of kind of ties in with the concept of accountability, I guess, because if your culture is this highly accountable culture, on the one hand, that can be quite good because we want to recognize when things work well. We want to be able to assign praise. We want to be able to recognize success. But on the other hand, that can sometimes cause conflict with psychological safety, would you say? Or do you say the two can work together?
I'd say the two can and should work together. So again, I was thinking about this from a personal perspective, and I thought where I felt real accountability is when someone's challenged me around a problem in an organization, and I've come up with an answer or an idea, with the team I'm working with, and they've gone, yeah, it kind of works out. That looks sensible. Go off and do it, and then tell me the results. I'm now absolutely accountable for that piece of work because ultimately I've researched the problem. I've come up with the options. As a team, we're now going to drive it into the business. So my view is psychological safety should absolutely drive accountability, because I'm not doing it because Phil's told me to. I'm doing it because as a collective team, we've come up with a solution together. And for me, that's the goal of a leader. It's if you've hired great people into the team, ask them to research the problems, come up with the solutions. Maybe there is some guidance required, but then they drive in the results for true accountability. Where I've seen it not work is where I'm picking up the responsibility for something that I've been told to do. And therefore, if it goes wrong, I have no accountability, or there's a tendency to say, well, it wasn't my idea, which I think is really dangerous. I think linking that all back to your first question around the skill set of a leader, if you are empowering your team to do that, you then have to celebrate the successes and make sure that it's very clear that it's a collective team success. And at the same time, if it doesn't work, understand objectively why has it led to an outcome that's not as favorable as you hoped, and then what does that mean as a next step. So rather than the punishment, let's not do that again, guys, it's, well, how do we build on that going forwards? So I think, again, that in itself encourages accountability.
So you're basically saying there's a difference between accountability and blame, which has got sort of negative connotations. Okay, I'm going to take a little pause. We've got Liam. Have you got another question, another poll question that we can bring up, please?
We certainly do. So this one leads on to more ideas about management. We want to know, do you have management training in place in your business? Obviously, the last time we wanted to know about the tools in place, but obviously this one factors in more of the idea of it's all well and good having the tools in place, but the managers, need to know how to use them and, to identify the need for those tools in the first place, I suppose. So do we get your answers in there? Good few dozen or so responses coming in so far. Majority of people are saying yes, they do have management training in place. It's around about 80% at the moment. Between 75 to 80% so far. So the majority of people say that yes, they do have that training in place.
Excellent. That's good to hear. I guess sort of off the back of that then, I'm going to work on the assumption that most of our participants today are in the HR community. And the $6 million question that they'll ask is, well, okay, whose responsibility is psychological safety? Or you perhaps could extend it out to culture as a whole, I guess. Whose responsibility is that? Is that going to be, does that sit with HR, or is it something that they should divest and delegate out to ops, to the rest of the business?
I think invariably some of it sits with HR. So we've talked about the wider culture, the frameworks, the management training, the leadership competence in the organization. I think that there are fundamentals that rely on excellent HR practice to set that foundation. I think a huge part sits with leaders. Again, they need training and they need support and they need models, but they also need to really be focused on this, not as a piecemeal aspect of leadership, but as absolutely as a core part of their leadership practice. And I think ultimately it's company culture, so it's everybody. Once you've got those building blocks in place, it's everybody, including the team members themselves, that are responsible for facilitating it. And certainly one of the things I've seen, and it's really good to see when you're a HR practitioner and you start to put the tools in place, is that you can then put some onus on the team to provide individual feedback and collective feedback and start to come up with ideas, solutions, and drive in solutions with accountability. So from my perspective, you need that core, but then ultimately everybody is required to really drive it in and turn it into a business as usual, part and parcel of your day-to-day business.
And a little bit of a sort of left field a sort of adjunct to that, if you like, that I have heard argued is that there's a role for marketing as well, because marketing is looking at your EVP, your employee value proposition. It's looking at how you project yourself out, how the culture is projected to the outside community, be that to customers, to candidates, to recruits, to new recruits. And so from their perspective, they want to make sure that the image that they're projecting through those channels is a true reflection of the culture in the business itself. So there's no point them having sort of lots of glossy photos on their recruitment sites saying, the bean bags and the happy times. If the minute that a candidate walks through the door or a new starter walks through the door, all they see are cubicles and suits. So you want to make sure from a marketing point of view that's tied in together as well, that there's no dissonance between the company culture that you're projecting, that you talk about, the talk, and that when it comes between that and walking the walk as well, and that what's going on in the business is a reflection on that projection as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We've spoken about leaders and managers and what skills they need to have to get this to work, but sort of from regular sort of team members, what are your what would be the expectations on us, them, in terms of what do we need? What do they need to sort of get the most out of a psychological safety, and what can they contribute to making that happen?
Yeah, I think this is always an interesting topic in my mind, because there's an awful lot of books on leadership and management, and there's nothing really on what is it that makes you a good team player and an individual working with and for somebody. So for me, it's really crucial that message lands with people. So for me, it's absolutely participation, patience. Do the individuals in that team know what the restrictions are? We'll all be in different organizations with different restrictions. The art of the possible will vary according to the environments that we're all in. And I think acknowledging those constraints is really key. So if I'm working with and for somebody and I don't acknowledge the constraints and I am blaming them for things, then it's like a deck of cards, it all falls down. So for me, openness, participative, but also recognize the environment you're in, the constraints on your leader, on your manager, and on your peer group. So when I'm working with fellow peers across other functions, I have to acknowledge their constraints alongside their objectives and what they're trying to achieve. And ultimately, from my perspective, Phil, that it then creates, well, what are my responsibilities? I understand the environment, I understand the constraints, I'm participating, we're sharing ideas, I know why certain things aren't viable. I then have to own my responsibilities. I have to drive and look for solutions within the environment that I'm in. So for me, being a good team member is I do what I say I'm going to do. I understand the constraints on the team, and I work as a participant in that environment that I understand very clearly, rather than blame, push back, why can't things be done, etc., etc. So the team member is absolutely key in their contribution in that regard.
I think some of what I've written down here is patience. if I can add to what you've said, I think you do need some patience to be able to see that it's, you know, you're coming up with this feedback, but it's not potentially not going to be something that can be dealt with right away. But also understanding that you might put forward an idea that might not be fully baked, or might be wrong, or might be, you know, might not be something that's quite there yet, or might be something that you know, we'd love to do it, but actually there are constraints, and we can't physically implement what it is that you want to suggest. I mean, but speaking personally, I'm accused of this a lot, that I'll come out with an idea I know's got legs. It's got something we need to sort of collaborate with and make into something that can be actionable, but it's just not quite there yet. And by coming together with the team, I know that as a collective we can sort of make that something that is commercially viable. But to get past that first hurdle, I've got to be able to sort of be open to coming up with that idea, even though I know it's not it's not quite there yet. And then secondly, knowing that yeah, it's something that I'm going to have to take ownership for. So no, yeah. I totally get that. Do you have any sort of success stories you can share with us about psychological safety?
Yeah, certainly. So in terms of utilising the anonymous feedback from Winning Temp, one of the things that we've done, and certainly I've enjoyed doing, is identifying that objective starting point, and then using that as a comparative measure in terms of distance travelled. What I think where I've really benefited in recent years is when it's been a brand new team. So say, well, actually, I'm new in as the leader. How are they all feeling? Mm-hmm. And then going from fairly low participation right through to people feeling vulnerable, making mistakes, being innovative, right through to actually they're executing things with complete autonomy. And that's ultimately where you want to get to, in my view, as a leader. I've got great people in the team, I'm recruiting great talent, but then they're actually executing things with enthusiasm, being in an environment where they can make a mistake and know I'm not going to kind of critique it, but critique for improvement. And then I've still got the objective comparison of, okay, let's remember this is where we were, how have we got to where we are? That's then got to remain in place. So going back to what do managers and leaders need to do, it can also unravel the other way very quickly. So how do you continue operating in that manner going forwards? And I think it's that objective honesty about performance, about the challenges the business faces, that's really crucial. So we've talked a lot about team performance and individual performance on this call, but actually being open about the challenges that the business faces is key to all of this, because I can't operate in an open, honest environment if I don't truly understand why we can't do certain things, or why the priority is A and not B. So I think where I've seen it work really well is objective honesty about business performance, and then what does that mean for team and individual.
Yeah, and looking at it from where I come from as a customer success manager, it's always great to see a client where they've sort of invested in this area of the culture, and you do see the results. And you see the sort of throughput of ideas. I mean, you talk about Winning Temp and how that can, employee engagement tools can facilitate this, but you see these ideas sort of coming out of focus groups, coming out of team meetings, being analysed, and then being implemented, and then you see that sort of conveyor belt of initiatives driving engagement. I mean, one example was a hotel chain that I'm working with, where they implemented a new LMS, a new learning management system, because that was what the feedback they were getting from the staff was. They needed an opportunity for their personal development, and so they were able to act on that and sort of, that came through the system. And because they were able to make that investment, because they had the data, they had the feedback from the teams to be able to justify it. They couldn't just sort of, I think you mentioned this earlier, just to sort of guess at what would be good for the business. They knew from the feedback they were getting that this was something that the business needed. So as a result, they made that spend and they could justify it to the business. Okay, lastly, because I'm conscious that time's marching on, what tips would you give to an organization that wants to improve its psychological safety?
So if it's something that's brand new to the organisation, I'd certainly start with anonymous feedback. You know, where are you starting from? What's the objective comparison that you can look back on in 6 weeks' time, 6 months' time, and a year's time? So if you're at the very beginning of this journey, I'd be looking at anonymous feedback, getting some objective data. I'd start with open ideas, open idea sharing sessions. Again, I don't know where people are in respectively in terms of behaviour. You can't go from one extreme to the other, but I would certainly start with, well, this is what our anonymous data is saying. What are the ideas that are going on in the team? And I think one of the things that's always interesting is everyone's got an opinion. So if people aren't saying anything, it means that you haven't got a psychologically safe environment, because I can guarantee everyone will have a view on organizational priorities, team priorities, and team performance. So I'd start with that, and then I'd start to be really objective and honest as a leader or a HR practitioner about performance and about where you'd like to take things and what do other people think, and try and get agreement that way. And start showing that vulnerability that we've talked about in a really proactive way. Start seeking to understand before you want to be understood. And I suppose all of this, not to be too corny, but it's, are we really walking the walk? So how do you encourage it? I've got to be vulnerable if I'm expecting you to be vulnerable. I've got to share ideas and ask questions if I'm expecting you to as a team member. And ultimately, you know, when I'm training line managers, this should be really exciting, because you're going to end up in a position where your team are going to have loads of ideas. They're going to be as innovative as they can be. And you could be in a very, very different space in 6, 12, 18 months' time. So show that vulnerability, encourage them to do the same, and then see where that takes you in terms of performance and their own personal views. And you may be surprised at what people say and how people view the team in itself.
Absolutely. Okay, I think that's come to the end of my questions. Liam, do we have any questions from the am I allowed to say audience, from the participants?
We certainly do, yeah. Well, firstly, thank you for everyone who's been getting involved with the poll and things like that and stuff. We had a question from Kerry Hastings, and it regards one of the issues that Jonathan was just talking about there, about the vulnerability. So Kerry asks, would you agree that emotional intelligence comes into things, into a manager not being vulnerable?
From my side, yes. I think it does, and I think it's a case of coaching managers in that regard. Ask them where they feel they're vulnerable. Why can't they talk about certain things with their team, and try and open up the door that way. But certainly, if you haven't got strong emotional intelligence and you aren't picking up that you haven't got participation in your team, you may struggle to begin with. And certainly, we talked earlier about observational input. You can see an environment that isn't psychologically safe, but if you've got low emotional intelligence and you are used to controlling your team, you may well not see an issue with that. So I think firstly, it's why should a manager see an issue with that kind of behavior, and what are the advantages to them of behaving differently? And that might be that you need to coach them and discuss what the future could look like if they behave slightly differently. And as I said earlier, it should be really exciting for them, particularly if they've got high potential and talent within their teams.
If I can add to that, I think there's something to be said for growth mindset, and not just getting the feedback and sort of, but actually wanting it. And like Jonathan was saying, when there is no feedback, that's when you start to worry, because everything's gone quiet. If you've got that growth mindset, you don't see feedback as being a negative. You see it as food almost. You see it like nutrition, that it's something that you need to be able to perform at your best. And it can only be a learning experience for you. So yeah, absolutely, emotional intelligence comes into it.
That's great. Thank you both for your answers there. Something that I picked up on towards the end there as well, you've talked a lot about anonymous feedback, and I'm just wondering, in the absence of that strong level of psychological safety, what are your thoughts on the importance of allowing people to give that that level of anonymous feedback?
I tell you what, actually, I've got an idea. Why don't we put that out on the poll? Can we put that out on the poll? Can we do that? Let's see what others think before we answer.
Yeah.
That's
so
all right.
anyone wants to get involved, do so. Do you use surveys in the workplace to get anonymous feedback? Let us know your responses there. That's another simple yes or no response. Again, a few responses coming in so far. Vast majority of people say yes, they do have anonymous feedback in place. That's around about 95% of people so far actually are saying that they have
anonymous feedback
surveys to gain anonymous feedback. Yeah, so quite a strong result there already, I can see on that one. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Phil and Jonathan?
I mean, my view is it depends what your environment's like. If you've already got a really open environment, it might be that you can go straight to brainstorming, stop-start continues, open discussion. But if you're asking questions and you're being faced with silence, or they're all agreeing with you, if you happen to be the leader in this environment, then I would suggest that you really need to give them the opportunity to be anonymous and give the true reflections and their true thoughts. So I think it depends on the situation, but regardless, I find temperature checking and anonymous feedback really useful, because I can also see when something changes in the environment, how does that impact the team? But certainly I think if you're getting stunned silence, then you know that you need some anonymous feedback and you need people to feel that they can be honest with you.
I think anonymity is a place to start with, isn't it? You can always start with anonymous feedback, and then if you need to, sort of open it up and sort of tease it out and get to a stage where people feel. But it also, it's back to what we were saying about accountability and ownership. If you are going to take ownership for the ideas and the data, the feedback that you've got within your teams, then maybe there's an argument to be had for not having the anonymous feedback. I think for where I sit with the clients that I work with, the emphasis should be kind of what Jonathan was saying towards the beginning, on the team and what's going on in the team, because it doesn't really matter who in the team is giving you that feedback. As a leader, you just want to know there is an issue and I need to work with this. It could be a good thing, it could be something that's working well for the team, or it could be something that's holding the team back. Who in the team is telling you this is less relevant than the issue itself and what we as a team are going to do about it. So I've got mixed feelings about anonymity, but it can certainly help. There are certainly situations, unfortunately, where it needs to be anonymous, and there are circumstances where let's own it and let's celebrate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about finding that balance, isn't it, in there? Denise McGuire asks, what sort of questions should we be asking in our surveys? Are there any sort of prime examples that you can throw out there for anyone who might not be too sure of where to start?
And that might be more of a question for you, Phil, as
well, we funnily enough, we have a product. Winning Temp is based on research that was done by the University of Gothenburg into employee engagement. So that kind of, we use that research, and you're welcome to look on our website. There's a white paper you can download which explains the research and what the conclusions were and what the questions they asked. But are you asking, was that particularly with regards to psychological safety or just generally?
I believe so, yeah. I think what sort of questions should we be asking in those surveys? Yeah, so I think generally a broad thing.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah. If you have a look on our website, there's some great examples and there's some research there you can download and have a look at.
I mean, obviously, I'm a user of Winning Temp. I think that the measures I've found particularly useful is the participation rate. When participation is dropping, that's not a great sign. What's leading that to happen? Trust and teamwork. So if I've got high trust, high participation, positivity around teamwork, I know that we're heading in the right direction. If some of those key metrics start to drop, that is a leadership concern.
I think also there's something to be said for what level of the business you're looking at. Are you looking at it more on an operational level? Are you looking at it from a manager's point of view, or are you looking at it from a senior leadership board level? Because if you're looking at it from a senior leadership point of view, you might want to look at things like employee net promoter score, or ENPS, or sort of overall sort of broad brushstrokes as the overall temperature, the overall feedback, rather than sort of getting into the weeds of specific issues and specific sort of things that need to be dealt with on an operational level. So I think there's something to be said for sort of keeping that split as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you for your answers there, guys. We had another question, a really interesting one from Helen, and this regards something that sort of seeps into every area of HR at the moment, which is around neurodiversity. And so Helen was asking, have you explored, how people who are neurodiverse in the workplace, how factoring them into an environment that's asking for psychological safety? Are there any sort of pointers on that subject there for you too?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, it's a case of, from a leadership perspective, do you know your people? So, whether it's a neurodiversity issue or something else, do you truly know what's driving them, what's impacting them out of work? Have they got a neurodiversity issue or not? So for me, again, how do you create an environment that works for the team that you have? And all teams are different. There'll be things impacting one team that you will never experience in another. So for me, is the manager and the leader aware of that? And then what does that individual need to participate in the overarching group? And, again, psychological safety is the overarching group, and it might be how do the team members interact with one another? What tools do you need to apply to get the best from an individual within that team? It's a bit like a sport analogy, isn't it? You build your team around the team members, and if a football team's got a really strong defence, they tend to be built around a really strong defence. So the first challenge for a leader is, do they know the team? Do they know what's impacting the individual? And then how do you best build around that environment? That's my personal view.
I hope that wasn't a knock at Spurs, Jonathan. I think I would say two things. Firstly, I prefer to focus on inclusivity. If you go down the route of sort of neurodiversity, you can end up thinking about lots of different types of diversity, and you can end up, rather than sort of going down that route, you really want to be focused on making sure that everybody in the team is included, feels included and respected, and that their views matter, whether that's anonymous or not. But I think also you need to understand, how do these people best communicate? Because not everyone is comfortable coming forwards in a focus group, in a face-to-face meeting. It could be they need, without plugging the product too much, maybe they need an anonymous app or a tool like ours. Maybe there are other channels through which they feel more comfortable communicating their feedback. So yes, Jonathan's absolutely right. One size does not fit all for everybody, and sometimes there are better ways to do it. Maybe some people do actually prefer talking on Teams than being in person. It's making sure that you've got the right channels there for the team.
That's great, thank you. Well, I think that sort of is most of the questions that we've had so far. So thank you so much to everyone who got involved with the questions there. Thank you to Phil and Jonathan for today's session as well. That was really
thank you.
Yeah, anyone who had a few people asking about the link to the research earlier, so we'll get that out to you after this session as well. And that leaves us with just about enough time now to show the Winning Temp demo. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone again for watching today, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Welcome to Winning Temp. Winning Temp is an AI-driven platform that helps companies engage their employees at a whole new level. Here's how it works. Our platform uses machine learning to tailor-make surveys for employees. These are sent out weekly or however often you'd like. The questions are based on research about the real drivers of motivation and performance. The surveys are quick too. They take employees less than 10 seconds to answer, and they can leave anonymous comments if they like. This data creates what we call temperature. In one quick scroll, you can understand how employees are feeling in real time, across the areas that matter most according to science, plus any other areas you would like to gather data on. Your managers get their own dashboards, where they can see the full picture of what's happening within their own teams, and dig into the first-hand feedback. If they're short on time, they can simply go to Insights to see the most important developments to be aware of, like what strength their team is showing, what the current challenges are, and if there are urgent problems that need attention. All this information can be easily pulled up in a report. Managers can then use this data as a starting point for important conversations and easier decision-making. As a leader, you can consult the heat map to check in on progress across your whole organization and know exactly where to step in to offer support. Don't leave anything to hindsight. Get the full picture of employee experience in real time and start taking action on what matters most with Winning Temp.